they chose the right person actually post lunch. Uh, I would say that because either to wake you up or to show that the food was good. Anyways, uh, in this conversation today, I hope to share some learnings we've had, but more importantly, invoke certain thoughts. We all AI and analytics professionals. When I talk about waste, when I talk about shortage, which I'm sure each one of us are experiencing in our day-to-day life, it's not just about what can we do, but kind of look within ourselves of what we are doing on a day-to-day basis and how can we contribute to reduce waste as analytics and AI professionals. But more importantly for me, as an individual, there is only one Earth. There's no other place right now. Yes, there is a blue pipe dream of we all probably migrating to Mars, which is still far out. At least in my lifetime, I may not be doing that. But probably my children or my grandchildren may experience that. But for me right now, it's only one Earth. And we all need to contribute in our day-to-day life to ensure that there is reduced waste, and we reduce waste. And when I look probably at the food which was happening, many of us were wasting food. I know this is not to talk about, I'm not an emotional speaker or a speaker which has come here to motivate about wastage of food, but there is a real shortage of food which is happening, and there are a lot of, but when you put a different perspective, there are a lot of people who are going hungry. And when you look at the pipeline of the wastage, yes, I gave a reference that there is a lot of food shortage happening at the last mile, which is where the consumption is happening. But if you look at the entire value chain of production, whether it is food or any other food material, there is enormous amount of waste. Yes, there are a lot of startups looking to make electricity out of banana peels. I don't know if you've heard about that. Or make electricity out of tires. Yes, those are novel concepts. But if you stop that, you can actually reduce shortage, which is a more bigger problem than wastage. And there's a recent study actually done by BCG. And this is a very powerful study which BCG actually conducted, because most of the misconceptions which many of us have, that wastage is happening at the last mile, but if you really look at it, the pre-production process, there is enough wastage, and actually companies are losing billions of dollars, whether you look at CPG space or whether you look at retail, or even in the tech side, there is enough wastage happening before even the food gets into the shelf of a retail store. And how do you close that? How do you curb that? Because it's not only trying to curb wastage, but also save a lot of costs, which many of the companies are facing today. And when you think about any adversity, which the last 2 years have taught us, there is always great opportunity. So it's a $1.5 trillion problem, actually, and it's not too far out. Again, a data from the same study. But if you really dissect on how that problem can be solved, there are enough use case and enough data points tells you today that if you apply the right tech, AI, and analytics, you can actually go ahead and save a lot of money by just doing what we do in this room on a daily basis. But how many of you all follow Times 100 magazine, the best tech innovations? Have you all seen that? It comes out every year. Have you all seen that? There's been definitely a big change in the last 2 years. A lot of innovation happening on health, personal touch, a lot of focus around making humanity better. But with all this promise, like in the first opening keynote, as it was rightly said, many of times when we talk about analytics, there is enough exceptions being spoken. I'll give you real examples. We are talking to quite a few of new customers, and they say we have a graveyard of MVPs. And many of us are undertaking that MVP. And the issue with many of these MVPs not seeing the day of the light, you're actually creating waste, which we don't realize. And that waste is wastage of effort, waste of data, waste of tech, and waste of a lot of processing knowledge which has gone in, and the time wasted, which probably could have been done better, served better to do something bigger and better. And because of that, a lot of focus or a lot of promise of AI actually doesn't see the daylight. And we see that today when you look at many of these stats from another company, which is McKinsey here, talking about adoption of AI. When you look at these different stats and when you look at the adoption of AI across different departments within an organization, it's just alarming. And when you look at supply chain, and now if you tie back to the stat which I shared, like there is so much of opportunity to really save $1.2 trillion of waste by just focusing your efforts on analytics within supply chain. And when you look at the supply chain adoption, it's pretty weak. It's pretty alarming that why it is not happening. And one of the reasons it is not happening is because all of us, as individuals, as professionals, love to talk tech, data, models. And that is true, right? Because that's what we know. But we forget the last mile is the individual who's going to use it. And we forget to actually appreciate the individual who's going to use your insight, your information, or your intelligence to help their job better. And these are the individuals. They are not data scientists. They are not data engineers. They are not individuals who've probably studied also. They are individuals who are probably doing the job, which is critical for the organization. And how can you make their life easy? And if you just take an example of supply chain, and if you take the same analogy within sales, marketing, operations, HR, you would not find people who are usually data-oriented or understand data the way we would on models or tech. And you further dissect this individual, and when you start appreciating these individuals, which we often don't because we appreciate data, models, and tech more, that the person has a lot of knowledge. The person has more knowledge about that system, about the process on a day-to-day than any one of us today. We do have data knowledge, but the day-to-day operations, he or she has far more knowledge than any one of us. Is juggling multiple priorities. Tech, data, and model is not one of their priorities. Ensuring that the pallet gets loaded on the truck or the production system is running with the right efficiency is that priority which they are focusing on. Knows the trick of the trade probably better than many of us, and actually makes a lot of decisions which are known to us and unknown to us. And if you go further in their mind and you dissect their day in the life on a day-to-day basis, they have capabilities which we often underestimate. They have abilities to consume. You know, I always say that today we talk the 3T language, which is tech, terminologies, and tools, rather than focusing on the 3 I's, which is how do you deliver insights, information, and intelligence. And you can do that irrespective of dashboards, models, all of that, but you need to focus on those 3 I's. But how do you ensure that this individual who's there on the shop floor or who's there on the street selling, how do you enable that individual with the right 3 I's on a day-to-day basis? And you're not trying to replace. The first focus is automation, yes, but how do you enable or augment? Because those skills, those individuals are not easily replaceable. Yes, we talk about robotics, we talk about fancy machines going ahead and replacing certain jobs, but there are certain jobs which are still there right now. But how do you focus your efforts on enabling and augmenting? And now when you put all of this in perspective, and when you start thinking about deploying your AI and analytics models, you really need to start dissecting, and the message which I want to start sharing is, think about decision first, rather than data, tech, and model first. And when you think about decision first, or when you think about enabling an individual with the right 3I, it's actually art and science. It's not just science. It is not just about how you ensure that your models work, but also how that individual will consume, and how do you enable, and more importantly, believes in what you're doing. one of the big questions which we get asked, and I'm sure each one of you get asked, the believability of the data or the model which is being represented. Like, how do you ensure that it is quite represented, and it is, more importantly, it is able to go ahead and enable that individual which is going to make that decision on a day-to-day basis? And more importantly, what is that nudge methodology which you will leverage to ensure that that person is able to consume the information? Nudge as a framework, as a methodology has been there for many, many years. We get nudged every day, unknowingly or knowingly, which we don't realize. But as an analytics professional, you need to start thinking about what are those nudge frameworks? What are those nudge methodologies which you typically leverage to push the envelope further? And you ensure that the analytics doesn't come in the way of you or that person who's actually going to drive the consumption. So I want to leave you all with certain thoughts. And I was given 30 minutes, but I don't like to talk a lot. But this is my recommendation of things which you should consider. Is when you are thinking about enabling adoption or focusing on driving adoption within an organization, forget all formulas, forget all recipes. You have to dissect it in a way that how do you enable and augment and not replace? Yes, the first thought will come in is how can we replace an individual, but how do you enable and augment? Specifically on skills which are more critical. Use the right medium. There are no disrespect to any technology companies, but we always get associated to certain tech, whether these are dashboarding or these are enablement platforms. But what is the right medium? If that organization believes in WhatsApp, if the organization is highly oriented towards Excel, if this organization is highly oriented towards PowerPoints or even email, how do you enable them? And that is the most interesting premise which we need to think about, and that's where it starts focusing on decision first rather than data or tech or models first. I often say to my team, "Jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai." Or what looks good sells good, people who don't understand Hindi. So how do you represent your story? How do you share your story? And that's when I talk about the art and the science. When you're representing something, when you're sharing something, especially in the data world, you have to make it look good. And you have to make it look good in the context of that individual will appreciate that it looks good, not in the context of what you think it looks good. And there is enough conversations about how do you build your right teams. You actually need an artist. You need somebody who can drive that thought process. Just the Cypher, the initial screen which you saw, it's beautifully done, at least in my eyes, right? But if you think about it and if you dissect it, there's a lot of geometry lines. There is data there. So you need to think about how you make your data sing, your data look good, and your models look good. And whatever applications, the final application which is going to go in the hands of the user is really easy to consume. Today there are benchmarks of how Uber is easy to think about when you think about implementing something, or Amazon is easy to go ahead and buy a product. Those experiences, those benchmarks have become standards for everything in the industry. You can't just standard a benchmark, oh, that tool looks like this, I should go ahead and build a tool in this way. You should think about tools as examples from parallel industries and parallel universes, which really makes things better. And last but not the least, even a lot of analysts are talking about this, is closed loop systems. We build a model, we ship it out, and it's like a God's gift to the individual that they can figure it out. But we don't have any feedback system on how are they using it, or are they even using it, and if there are certain decisions which are really enabling them on a day-to-day basis. And if that is not built in from a workflow, from a process perspective, and not thought about, it really doesn't make the cut. It really doesn't make the cut in front of the individual's eyes. And that becomes a critical differentiation when you think about how you drive analytics as the last mile and to the last mile. Yes, there is a lot of points about edge computing, but if you think about edge humans who are going to use your analytics on a day-to-day basis, it changes an entire perspective. So I just want to leave you all with this thought, that don't build graveyards of MVPs, because there is a lot of that happening today in this industry. But let's do our bit in ensuring that there is reduced wastage of skills, of resources, and our time to ensure that we put it in the right effort, something like supply chain. And there are many more such use cases which can really have an impact to the humanity and to every one of us at large. Thank you.